Good afternoon and welcome to the third day of the third international conference of What If World History. And today our keynote speakers are, well, I won't say special because all the keynote speakers are special, but have particular characteristics which make that this session will not only be an invited lecture session, but also a sort of hands-on masterclass, because today we have a writer and a director. And given their creative output and professional career, we found it interest to have a more interactive session. So first, we will have Pedro Cipriano, a writer, editor, the founder of Editorial de Emergência, and also co-founder and CTO of the CO2 Offset. And his talk will be about my life, not as a courgette, but as a Portuguese speculative fiction editor and writer. Please, Pedro.
Good afternoon. So for the next 20 minutes, I will try to convince you that I'm not a courgette. Let's hope that I'm successful. So my academical career has nothing to do with books. So I started in 2004 with a bachelor degree in physics, specialized in superconductors. Then I skipped, I went to my master thesis at the master degree, which I defended in 2010 on computational physics. And so on for a PhD in Germany for particle physics, namely quantum chromodynamics. And you now start wondering what this guy has to do with books, right? So I went to a postdoc again in physics about Higgs boson, which I finished in 2016. And then I went to my professional career, and now I'm working in an aerospace company in Portugal, which tries to predict the hazards to forests and try to prevent them. And that's my more academical career. But, and now comes the twist. I also write, I've been a writer for the past 19 years. And what these two things have in common? You wonder. Usually people, when they come to faculties, you tend to separate humanities, the guys that write and read and philosophize, to the guys that do science, which are completely opposite. Not what? If you think in science, I don't know how many people here are backgrounds, science background. None of you? Okay. But in science, we have one thing very important, which is hypothesis. Every now and then, when we want to test the things, we postulate a hypothesis, and then we try to generate data through experimental scientific methods, otherwise, or computational, to try to prove these hypotheses true or false. And then the rest of the scientific community will come also with their results, with their experience to try to prove these hypotheses true or false. And what the writer does, usually picks up the hypothesis as well. But instead of turning to scientific methods, we do otherwise. We do fiction. And it's also another way to test an hypothesis. Let's try to do a very small example, hands-on exercise. Let's try to do an hypothesis. Let's say that our government will just now put a very specific natality program with tax relief, more time to the mothers and fathers to stay with their children, better schools, better nurseries, less fees for university, everything to stimulate natality. What do you think that will happen? This is just an hypothesis. Give us Give us some hints. Directly, just like that, or gradually? How do you expect it to happen?
Because the children to make it takes 14 weeks. So
I think in yearly, like these things will have like immediate effect, like will jump the natality to the double, or will just gradually increase. Will you say that will have a dependence on the if the family is poor, medium, or more rich? Will have the same effect, different effects?
It won't affect the rich because that's the measures won't apply to them. So we know to the poor families, an increase of children in poor families, middle class, middle class.
So you are already constructing something. Let's put in another way. You think will affect couples with higher level of education or lower level more? Higher level, okay. This is an hypothesis. There is no right or wrong. We are speculating at the moment, right?
Because I don't think that changed the perspective of the less educated people, because.
But we can argue against. You see, those people, oh, I never had the chance to put my children to university. Now I have, because this tax relief will make it possible to put my children to university to have a better future. It's a possibility, right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. We are just speculating.
Yes, but for example, you can be highly educated and be poor, and it happens. So
You have more support, more.
Yes, I was implying the two things separately. Yes, I was asking first about the economical class and then
job type, right? And simultaneously, you have the scenario proposed, and you have an increase of births, and most of us agreed that would be the poor families with less chances for education to expand in numbers. And then we'll have what? 2 decades later, a world with a lot of people that don't have jobs because meanwhile the artificial intelligence took them. And
that's the second part.
You have a hellish salary to that.
But I proposed at the beginning in my hypothesis that will come also with incentives and help for putting people to buy and to university degrees at least. So to give them some kind of possibility to work in this dystopian world. It's true. We'll have like we had before. It's not new. When the computers started, lots of jobs like the lich keeper, it's a job that doesn't exist anymore. And the guys work at the bank and were like one of the most important jobs and doesn't exist anymore. Does people stop working at banks? I don't think so. The banks still have plenty of opportunities for employment. So what we can imagine is that after artificial intelligence, we'll still have jobs, but different
The question is not the jobs, is type of jobs you mentioned, wealth, and usually middle class jobs. What I was comparing is what type of, you're assuming that every children born in the poor families will go for the educational level.
I'm assuming a higher probability than now with this reform, because that has to be an incentive. Otherwise, if this is also an hypothesis, we are not I would say that if families think that their children will not have better chance, will not bother to have more children than what they think before this proposal of the government. Because if nothing measurably changes, why do they change their plans? Very unlikely, right? It has to be a major incentive and something that people think, oh, this will quite make a difference, right? Otherwise, nothing changes. It's what we can measure because we see sometimes government do like these nice reformations that have no impact because they are not attractive or not adjusted to reality. But we are supposing this. Okay, but that's very interesting. Let's pick it up a little bit. I'm still at some minutes. So let's pick it up a little bit. So how does artificial intelligence, the rise of it, will impact this new generation that has larger numbers than expected because something went different here? It's already in a branch of history because these measures were not put in place, at least not so far. So we're already discussing an alternative history, right? And we are discussing Portugal, that you mentioned, that has higher number of children. And now we are trying to discuss how these children will interact with the new types of jobs that will exist in 20 years. So welcome, you just started to write your science fiction novella right now. And that's how we connect these both things. The writers also do hypotheses. They when we write alternative history, science fiction, even fantasy, we are always assuming that. What if? It's how it starts. It's the same thing as a scientist. What if? It's a simple question. And although people of science use scientific methodology, data, and so on to prove or disprove their hypothesis, writers have a harder time because we have to make everything up. But everything that we made up should at least have some believability. I probably made this word right now, but don't worry, say it. You have to believe that that might be true. For example, you cannot propose something ridiculous that no one can believe. Let's assume that government puts this in place, and for some reason, only the higher class start to have more children. You will not believe. You say, not what we expect by our empiric. Or if you were right to propose that, you better have a good explanation for this, because otherwise no one will believe it. And that is the relation between the two things I do. Because, for example, in the job I'm doing at the moment, we are also predicting the future of a forest before it happens. We do a digital twin with everything detailed, even every leaf of a single tree is mapped. And you can almost walk inside the virtual forest. And then we run scenarios on it. If it has less water, will it burn easily? If it burns, which trees will be more affected by burning? What is the maximum intensity of fire this can hold? What about pests? Is this liable to pests or able to withstand them? What's the health of these trees? And we are also running alternative history for a bunch of trees. And the history we are predicting for these trees using satellite data and all these fancy instruments that I don't want to go into detail because we'll bore you to death. And we run artificial intelligence algorithms on it and see what happens after. So we are doing this alternative history for trees. And also, if you pick up social sciences, they're also trying to also start doing these kind of things, like thinking about possibilities, because before most of our sciences were working backwards, like, okay, this happened. So nice, let's understand it why. And now the future needs to do things differently, because the scenarios that are possible nowadays are just infinite, and everything within certain constraints can happen. And more, I was discussing with Anna during our lunch break that would be nice if politics, for example, just to pick up something like instead of just proposing some reform, they will just think about what will happen, not just first order, like, okay, if you do this, will be more children. Dot, stop, it's over. But like thinking of second order and third order consequences. Some of them will be good, some of them will not be so good. Just imagine that we, for some reason now, just having a population that Portugal cannot support. We don't have enough food, we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough things. We should have think this before putting these children to do all right. Otherwise, we'll have a huge problem. So that's it. I think my time will be up in 2 minutes, I guess. And so I work as a scientist most of my life. Even now, my work is not as a science in terms of faculty, but is in science for a private company. But one thing that never left me was the passion to write. Because in writing, I can do all the hypotheses. I can just imagine it. And I will invite you, every one of you, to just try to do this simple exercise. Just pick up the reality as it is now, today, and do an hypothesis of one thing that will go differently. Just one thing. And try to think of the first order, will be easy, but then the second and third order effects. And if that not make you a science fiction writer, nothing will do. So this is my challenge. Start that and then write about it, and probably we'll have 6 more science fiction novels next year. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much, Pedro. And now we have Professor Vera Casaca, who's a writer and film director. And it's at present being live streamed from University of St. Joseph in Macau, China. And the title of her talk will be, "What if NASA had not hired the hidden figures? Could Jim Crow laws have hindered space travel history?"
Hello, everybody. Just want to make sure if I'm being heard. Is it okay? Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. First of all, I would like to thank you for this invite. And I took the liberty to actually feel a bit more free and just ask a lot of questions to myself, because although I have been in science and then I changed to cinema, I do not find myself anymore so restrained sometimes by the scientific field, and I like to just use a lot of my imagination. So I took this challenge to see, to reflect, but also to, I think, challenge my imagination. So I just want to let you know that my presentation is a bit more perhaps free, and I'm not a historian, nor work in the field of history research or not. So I will try to now share my screen to show my presentation. I hope it works out. So let's see. Okay, is it, just give me please the heads up to make sure that it's working. Okay, so actually the idea for this presentation was reignited, I would say, just a few months ago when I was watching for the very first time a film, and obviously because I work in filmmaking, it's something that always triggers my mind and inspires me. And the film that I have watched was Hidden Figures. And at the time, I did not know anything about this, but I thought it was very intriguing. And it made me reflect a lot about modern society. And yes, so this was the starting point, watching this film. And just to give you a brief description of the film, is a story of a group of women that used to work in NASA and started in the 40s. And this was in the southern states of the United States. And this film came at the same time or right after the release of the book by the same title. And it was a film that was, it's actually very well made, in my opinion. And also the actresses are just brilliant. They did beautifully. And they were nominated in 3 categories, including for Best Picture. And like I said, the film is based on true events. Of course, a lot of things are dramatized because you need that to sustain a film of 2 hours and a story, a narrative. But the core events were all there. And here in this picture, we can see the actresses, and in a wheelchair is a real mathematician that worked for NASA. And although this group of women that work in NASA, they were called the NASA's West Area Computers. In the film, they represent 3 women, but it was a large group. And you, of course, you also had white women working, but these women were working in the West department. And why were in the West department? It was because of Jim Crow. And for the people that don't know what Jim Crow was just a combination not only of laws, but also rules and behaviors that last nearly for 100 years. So they started right after the Civil War. Of course, the slavery was abolished, but it was a way to keep people separated and segregated and treated as second-class citizens. So I found this combination in history quite interesting when we had such an advancement in, especially in the space odyssey. And I thought it was quite interesting considering how harsh Jim Crow laws were instigated, especially in the southern states. It made me really think that NASA seemed to be very, very progressive in the 40s by hiring a department of Black women. But then I was doing a bit more research and I realized that actually this was instilled by the president, which was President Roosevelt at the time, because of the Second World War, because of course there was this shortage of men in the country that were being sent to the war. And there was just this lack of skills and brain power and also hand power in all sectors. So he signed this executive order allowing women and Black women to be employed by, at the time it was called NACA, which was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, and then later on it became NASA. So this, I think, opened the doors for women to really get hired, both white and Black women. But this was just a door that was open that previously has been just completely closed off. And it made me reflect a lot on whether it was a conscious political agenda or not. And at the bottom, oftentimes it is. And eventually, the next president, it was Kennedy. And because a lot of things that were happening, including failed invasions because of the Cold War and whatnot, and it seemed like the Soviet Union was winning the space race, and Kennedy thought, okay, we really need to commit our nation to try to beat the Soviets in the space travel battle almost. And I think at the time he was not aware that his speech and his idea would even open the gates more to this somehow social revolution of inclusion of women, particularly women of color. So I wanted just to jump back between continents. And I want to put this into perspective that Russia in '61 had just sent the first man into orbit. His name was Yuri Gagarin, and he managed to successfully be in orbit for 1 hour and a half, and he was the first man. And but it did not take long for the United States to catch up to him. So the following year, the United States managed to send a very talented astronaut, an American one, obviously, called John Glenn. And he was in orbit for 5 hours, which was very impressive. And where does here the role of the hidden figures, or how it relates to, was that all these trajectories, when you go into orbit, obviously they need to be calculated and recalculated because of the angle, the time that they can be launched, but also how they can return to the Earth so they can fall within a certain place where they could be rescued by the Navy, for instance. And although they were starting to have computers as we know now, a lot of scientists, including the astronauts, they wanted the data to be double checked by what it was called human computers. And it is true, this part of history, that John Glenn, the astronaut, a few days prior to his launch, and he had all the information from, of course, the different scientists and the different mathematicians, he asked for one of the girls, they call them the girls, which is quite patronizing, to recheck all the data. And he said, if this girl tells me that the calculations are right, I'm ready to go. And this girl, this incredible scientist and mathematician, Katherine Johnson, she was the one who ran back by hand all the equations and the calculations that the computer had already done. She did everything by hand, and she rechecked, of course, with colleagues, that he could come back at a certain time and at a specific location. So she is one of the most relevant people that helped John Glenn to successfully do this orbit. So another thing that I want to just mention very briefly, of course, we had the assassination of Kennedy, and he was replaced by his vice president, Johnson, Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson was actually a very progressive president, and he was the one who signed the Civil Rights Act, which wanted to abolish finally segregation. So it just, all these elements happening at the same time, they really challenged me to come up with what I believe it could have been so different. So we have these events happening, oh, I'm sorry, very close by. We have the Soviets sending Gagarin in 61. Then we have Glenn, who was sent immediately the following year. We have the Kennedy assassination, which happened in 63. And of course, Johnson, because he was the vice president, he succeeded Kennedy. But Lyndon actually, he had heart attacks during the presidency, minor heart. Could have been completely different if Johnny B. Lyndon had, Lyndon B. Johnson actually, had passed away as well, because there would have not been a submission of the Civil Rights Bill, because this has been already been tried actually before by Kennedy, and it was not accepted, of course, because there were powers that tried to maintain this system, which was very difficult to change, because obviously sometimes you change laws, but it's difficult to change personal beliefs and cultural beliefs and even economic. So actually, in reality, this happened and he could not follow through Kennedy's. So here, if Lyndon, and here we start with the ifs, had passed away and a new president could have come in his place, and there had been no submission of the Civil Rights Bill or Act to the Congress, and we would have a president that could have been perhaps Republican, or a right-wing sympathizer, or somebody who would not be so progressive at the time. I think that could have been a reversal of the Jim Crow laws and also the civil rights movement, although they were very powerful. And maybe 5 years ago, I went to Washington, and you can see all the hallmarks where Martin Luther King made his speech, and I felt very compelled as well. That's why I'm also talking about this topic, because it's something that it touches me personally, and I've been there, and I know how powerful it feels, this desire of freedom and equality. It's something that really touched me, but it's something that could have gone at a completely different way if it wasn't for Lyndon's. And if that social turmoil had started yet again, and we know that it's in cycles, because we just had this issue a few years ago now with the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and whatnot. So I still find it quite pertinent, also being a mixed race person, to talk about this subject. I believe that a new social turmoil could have caused a lot of people that were already in a better economical situations, including people of color, to perhaps lose their jobs, because the segregations also, it changes everything, including where you live, the transports that you can take to work, the job positions, whether they would be for white people or colored people. And I believe that NASA's program, including the funding and the advancements, could have been hindered by this little moment in history. So my proposal is that maybe by 1966, NASA programs could have come to a halt, leaving a lot of people, particularly people of color, unemployed, including people that work in mechanics and mathematics and mathematicians and whatnot. And this step back, or this halt in equality of rights, would have left a lot of people idle and perhaps jobless. But however, because I believe that somebody, I put here this quote, opportunities are never lost. Somebody will take the one you miss. And I truly believe this. So if many people that have this incredible capacity and are great scientists would have been out of work, I do believe that the Soviet space program would have seen a beautiful opportunity to expand their workforce and the brain power force as well, recruiting people that were already very experienced with the program, and perhaps could even give them information. And by the way, this is not like a cabal against the Soviet Union or the Russians because of the war. I just thought this topic was quite interesting. So I believe by the beginning of 1966, the Soviets would have started to go to the United States to recruit a lot of people that could help them to continue to be at the top of the race of the space travel. And this incredible scientist, Katherine Johnson, could have been recruited and even perhaps moved to the Soviet Union. And she could have been one of the leaders to continue to work in space projects, but in Europe instead of America. So could have a history be different? Could actually the data gathered by traveling the orbits, and actually was quite important to then do the launches and to the moon, could all of this have been done by the Soviets? And if so, this created a lot of questions in my head of if Russia or the Soviet Union could have gained at that time that breach in the American history or North American history, social space odyssey, nearly could have seen the opportunity, could have them gain the control and the monopoly at the time and access of more information through people, but also gaining of knowledge and scientific knowledge. And how would our space knowledge and landscape could have been affected today, even if we look at the Mars program, even now the more private institutions from Elon Musk and whatnot. And this, more than me trying to create an alternate history, which I did to a certain extent, it just created a lot of questions. Being here now in China or in Macau in 2023 of what could have been and how would our space information would be or hindered or not, and also the power that a nation could have gained out of information, that a lot of things we just don't know. So yeah, more than closing it up, I thought it would be nice to just leave this presentation a bit more open and hopefully make us reflect on how different it could be, our advancements in space travel, discovering. So thank you very much. I will leave this here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'm out of the picture, but here in sound. As this is a more interactive session, and this was quite an interesting scenario, I could propose if Vera and Pedro could guide us in how to develop a story from this challenging departing point. So you have here a film director and a screenwriter, and you have an editor and a writer. How would you pick up through this? And where do you focus? Because as though both creative media, there are differences. We talked about this today. There are things that only literature can give, and there are things that only cinema can give. And they are unique for each of the field. So you have here a very, very interesting departing point. How can one pick up from this, either to literature or to cinema, to build a story that is compelling and that will have meaning? I have to sit down. I'm sorry, my house is not in the best condition. I really need to sit down. Pedro, when go on.
So looking at this, we'll not have only space travel, history will be different, but also geopolitics will be quite different. I would expect it that maybe Soviet Union will not have collapsed because we'll have started to gain more of this Cold War and getting more allies and more people interested in there than the United States. Because all this was just a show off to prove which one was the most advanced. It was not about the moon at any point, it was just to show off which one could actually do something that was considered undoable at the time. So what I expect are some of the conflicts, even the first Afghan war in the 80s, in the 70s and the 80s would have been different. Also the collapse of Soviet Union would not have happened exactly at that time, maybe later, but not exactly at that time. And then maybe even our geography in Europe will be a bit different nowadays. Some countries will not exist at all, and maybe our frontiers will not be the same. One thing that I expected to be different is that there will be no SpaceX or such industries, because if the Soviet Union will continue to exist, it will be everything state operated as it was in the Soviet Union. No much individual entrepreneurship will be allowed. It's not how the Soviet Union was working. So we'll expect it that our 90s at least will be very different. So if I would write a book, it will be more likely on the 90s. I'd pick up maybe someone that had this, maybe born in the United States on this side of Europe, and just decided the other side was better, to give them a conflict between the two worlds and what's better in each of them, and why the change. Because what we were seeing in our real history was the opposite. People on the other side of the Berlin Wall wanting to come off this side. But if things were different, maybe it could have been the other way around. People from this side wanted to go to the other side, if things were better on the other side. So I will try to do a story on that. It will be my expectation to try to write the history on just this simple moment of history that could have changed just the entire world history. Well, how about you, Vera?
I'm sorry, I stopped hearing the last part. Was that a question?
I was finishing telling that our world geopolitics will be quite different now. And I was saying that will be my scenario for a book. And I was, what about you?
Oh, actually, I would take a more personal approach for filmmaking if I had used this, although of course it has a lot of gaps and a lot of voids in what I presented. Obviously, it needed much more research, but I would be more interested in a personal story, developing a character that have become or a double agent, or that would bring information not openly but hiding, and how that person would transition from actually being an American scientist to maybe a double agent to Soviet Union. So I think my approach would not be in a grand scheme of things of a historical perspective completely. I would go more, I'm more drawn into writing very character-based films more than a total global history, I would say. So I would probably follow a male or a female, which would have become a double agent. I would be very interested in developing that much more than doing this accurate geopolitical or geographical part of history. I would focus for, let's say, 1 year of the life of the character, doing the transition of this lifestyle and the risks that would have been involved in their life and their inner struggles within the narrative. That's what I think I would actually do.
When you are,
So we had a similar idea. So I was proposing someone, instead of going to the west side, to the east side, to the west side of Berlin Wall, was like someone trying to go from the west side to the east side. So just a person. What would make them change from one side to the other, and what would be like the illusions and also the realities that these people will face, that we always know when someone immigrates, that things in the country we arrive are exactly what we expect it to be. And there are always differences. And I will try to explore that on a character, that they promise something to them, to him, her, he or her, and then on the other side things were not exactly the same. Maybe better, maybe worse, but not exactly the same as promised. That will give a very interesting conflict.
Yeah, I agree.
what do you, each of you, so the question goes to both, since is the key factor in writing a compelling character-based story? Just the change that you see the character transitioning, the particular features of, for example, is it more interesting to have a nasty character developed for a hero or the other way around?
We have a very hard time here because all the good histories were already being written by the Greeks, and every now and then we are always, regardless if it's film, theater, science fiction, contemporary fiction, fantasy, we are always dealing with the same human feelings over and over again. And so what makes us draw to these histories is like the human factor. It doesn't matter, you can tell it's a elf, if it feels like a human, we can relate to it. And in the end, a good character-driven history, as every history should be, has to have these fundamental conflicts that humans face, that we can relate about life, death, love, compassion, regret, vengeance, depends. But all these feelings are known to us. And any good character, doesn't matter if he's a villain or a hero, has to feel these things. And for us as readers, at least in terms of books, for us as readers, we have to feel the same things for us to connect with our characters. Both as a writer first, we are the first ones to do the test drive with the character, but then the readers have to feel, have to understand these feelings. Otherwise, there will not be a good characteristic, because if it feels things that no one human feels it like this, like someone annoys you are never annoyed, just two horrible things, you are never even slightly affected, this is not human. You cannot, this will not be a believable character, because you think no human will react like this. I would not react like this if it was to me. But in the end, the story needs to speak to the reader, because the reader has to feel, wow, if this happened to me, I would feel these things. I would be drawn to take these, at least, if not the same options, at least to face these dilemmas as a person. If this happens to me, what I will do? And if you write a good history, the same dilemma of your character is the same dilemma that a real human would have. Maybe not the same option, but at least the same dilemma. And that's what makes people like to read the books character driven. That's my opinion.
I agree with everything that Pedro said. I think there's, whether we like a character or not, the fact that we can understand it through basic human emotions, and sometimes even what happened to the character before, and understand why the character is acting that way. Even if we don't agree with it, we are able to understand. And just as an example, because a lot of people lately are talking about this film, the Joker that came out a few years ago now with the Joaquin Phoenix, that I think is a very good example for people that want to dissect screenwriting and understand this sort of anti-hero vigilante sort of character. I think this is a great film to watch, because by all standards, the character is a bad character, but we see how the character turned out to be like that. So I think if we are able to create empathy and understand why the character acts like that, I think this is a great starting point. Another thing that I would add is giving a goal to a character, whether he's a villain or not, and then building obstacles and trying to see the character hitting the head against the wall. That makes us grab the book or watch the TV series or the film if we see a goal and an obstacle. So it doesn't matter whether the character is good or bad, because that is very gripping. Yeah.
I would like to open now questions for the public. Anyone from the public can, if you want, address Pedro and Vera.
I'm not sure because first I wasn't expecting this to be in English, so I'm a bit surprised and I might be nervous. So my English might be bad, so already apologizing. And secondly, I also came here because I was fascinated by the fact that both Pedro and Vera have a history with science. Because of Pedro, he has a big history with science, right? He still works with science. But Vera, I think she had a PhD in science, and now she works as a film director. And I came here because of them, as people themselves, rather than the theme of the what if. When I found out that both of you were here, I just wanted to ask Pedro, for example, how did you just enter the writing world since you were, I don't know, it seems to me that these both worlds are so separated from each other, and how could you, like, while working in science, enter this uh, writing world and be a writer and work with fiction? That's just, I, I, would- I would love to be able to do it, especially with poetry, because poetry is my passion in writing. But how could you do it? How were you able to enter the world of writing? How does that world work in the real world? The way myself understood.
I don't see big separation as I told you earlier. It's always a rule of hypothesis. The same hypothesis when you put in your biology when you do a thesis or a master degree, have a hypothesis that you try to prove using scientific method. And you can have an hypothesis as a book starter, like the one I presented here or they presented. It's an hypothesis, but you don't solve it with data because at least in variables in the past, so we cannot just redo this history and see how it will play out. We have to work on terms of imagination. And it's not very uncommon. I will tell you, in the physics degree I was attending, we have lots of writers coming out of them. Some of them for scientific, sorry. Scientific dissemination, for example. They try to be writers, but also for other purposes that has nothing to do with science at all. And I remember in our degree we had maybe 15 persons at the time, all years together, and at least 5 or 6 of them turned to be writers, published.
How?
We just like
How
we
can
were.
you publish something? Maybe I'm quite young and ignorant, but like, how could you? Because I agree with you. I think science and philosophy and all the things related to literature and all these things, I think they are very very related. But out there in the real world, it seems like they are so separated. So how can you publish like can I say this in English? Not that good. Um, how can you publish it? How did you enter this field?
As any of other colleagues that entered there, firstly, you write something.
Right.
And you work to make it better and better. So you don't deliver the first draft to the first person you write. Then it's like science, like when you are trying to find a good supervisor for a thesis, you go on research, you see which publisher is more inclined to this, and then you speak to them. You present your book like you present a group's work in university. You just defend your work.
And
That's it. It's very simple, of course. The bigger the publisher, the more resources, more competition you have. But it's like in university. The better the other students are, the more work you have to do to stand out. It's the same thing.
Okay, I cannot hear you. I think that the last question that I heard, I'm sorry, I think the connection got bad, was how Pedro and I went from science to writing, was that? Okay, I'm happy that you can hear me because I cannot hear you. So for me, I think two things were very important, and I will obviously only talk about my personal journey, was that although I really like science because of the passion to discover different things and learning, from a young age, I started to already writing. However, when you're 14 or 13 and you have to go to school and make a choice, I did not even know that I could make a living out of writing or being an artist or a director. That was completely out of my peers. I come from a small village in the Algarve. That was not something I could follow because that was out of the realm of my imagination to be an artist. So I did a safe bet, which was at the age of 14, I chose to go to the science area. But by the age of 29, I was finishing my PhD in Germany, and I was just miserable and unhappy that although I like science, and I think I did a good job, it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but I could not be stupid and I had to save money. So I started to save a lot of money so that the time that I had to do my PhD defense, I had enough money saved to go to New York City and study script writing and directing, because I had this ambition and this unwavering faith that I could do it, to the point that I was sort of delusional of, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, no matter what people say, I can do it. And you have to have this belief. Another thing that was very helpful was not to tell people, because people can cut your dreams very fast. So I kept it as a secret, so people would not say, oh, are you crazy now to change careers at the age of 30? Do you really believe you're going to be a director or a writer? You know, and people sometimes don't mean it in a bad way, but they want to protect you and they want to keep you in your comfort zone. So I did not tell anybody except I think my family. And when people found out, I was already gone to America to study writing. So I think that helped me since I was a child to not tell my dreams to people, only tell it to one people or two persons, but not more, because that gave me the faith and the ambition that I had to persevere. Also coming from science, which is, in arts, I believe it's great that we can use our imagination and we have our own timetable and schedule, and we are the ones that have to motivate ourselves. No one is there to tell us to do the job. But if you come from science, you're methodic and you're rigorous. So that can help your writing career because you have this systematic way of working. So actually that helped me, especially living in Germany for 5 years. Trust me, you become very systematic. I was like, oh, people come on time. Oh, people, you know. So when I made the transition, it was instilled in my way of being, like this timetable. I have to write at 6 o'clock in the morning and I can only finish at this time. So the transition, like Pedro said, I think I heard it in the beginning, it's not that difficult if you really put in the work and you believe yourself, whether you're good or not. You have to believe in yourself and you have to put in the work. And I was in New York studying and my friends were partying and drinking, and I was coming home and writing, and I was coming home and writing, and I was coming home and writing. And yeah, I think I was so focused in making it to prove myself I could do it. Yeah, that was really no thinking of, oh, I come from science and now I'm going into arts. I was just focused. And I think if you're focused, you can do it. Also, generally, I'm an introvert, but networking it helped me more than any degree. Going into parties alone and feeling uncomfortable and trying to make connections with the newcomer actors in New York or even in Portugal, putting myself in very strange situations where I could feel myself feeling nervous from talking with people, and he's a writer and she's a director and she's an actress. Just doing it, that was very helpful, because a lot of the jobs that I got on film set was because I met people through networking, although I'm a very introvert person. So I think if you follow like 2 or 3 things, that can help you. Of course, this is not a formula, but in my case, this was vital, I would say. I cannot hear you, so I don't know.
Consegue ouvir-nos?
Sim.
Ok, eu vou fechar o chat.
Portanto, so the joke was to make PhDs in Germany, and that somehow changed our
I think it can make you or it can break you. Definitely. I just came from this very loose south of Portugal Algarvian lifestyle by the beach. Then, oh, this is different here in Germany. Things work differently. So yeah, it was a beautiful learning experience and I needed that.
I also started my publishing house while in Germany. It was my last PhD, as I would not have enough troubles in my life. I decided publishing house in 2013. So
Oh,
1 year, exactly 1 year before defending my PhD.
wow. Okay.
January 2014 and start publishing House in February 2013.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And also use the money saved from the PhD to start it.
Yeah. I think you sort of have to make a plan of your life and know that you're taking the risk. And by the way, I was single without a child. I'm not saying this is an impediment, but I realized that I could make a move from Europe to America. Maybe if I had children, I would need the help of my family to do this move and pursue the dream. So I'm not oblivious to making these drastic choices and not taking into consideration our different personal life. So I cannot say, oh, this is what happened. I had the luxury at the time. I was not in a partnership. I did not have a boyfriend at the time. I did not have a child. So that allowed me to go and make that move. So had my life been different personally, maybe things would have taken perhaps longer because I would have to make a compromise. So I think it's important to also say that it depends on our personal life, but I think most of all determination and making a plan and just really networking and believing yourself like you're a crazy person, really.
Does anyone else have another question? We are on the last minute.
Just like to ask Pedro and Vera, what are they working just right now? What kind of ideas and speculative?
My answer is going to be quite short, so I will let Pedro take the lead because I have encountered since the last 2 years a massive, what is it called, writer's block, massively. And I thought it was a myth, but it's true. And I wrote very little in the last couple of years because I'm trying to deal with, yes, this feeling of imposter syndrome. So right now, at the moment, I'm teaching scriptwriting and filmmaking here in China. I also work in Faro, but I want to take next year to sort of come back to myself and start to write again and not have this negative voice because I want to write a feature film that I've started. So wish me luck. I need some luck. So Pedro.
So I'm now working on a book which will be like it's an alternative to our reality starting nowadays, and the only difference is what if there will be a terrorist group in Portugal with ecological priorities to impose the ecological agenda by force. And it's what I'm writing at the moment, because I think that sooner or later there will be more specific actions to protect our environment, and this starts to be a big topic, and especially the newer generations are not very tolerant on that. So I expect either by Pacific or more aggressive things are going to change. We don't know exactly how it goes, if you end up better or worse, but things are bound to change. And I'm writing a book expecting that some guys take this very seriously and start to reshape our country using the drone warfare, suicidal drones against targets that are destroying our ecosystem. For example, against the CEOs of big companies or politicians that are taking decisions that they do not approve, they will simply solve the issue with a suicidal drone, which is reality nowadays, as we know.
Well, and on that happy note, And
Such fiction. Oh no, it's just fiction.
Oh.
We have not heard about people using suicidal drones in Portugal against anyone.
Yeah.
So please relax.
And
This is not the instructions manual.
I know that, but as you both know, sometimes you write or create a book or movie, and you believe there's be only one type of reaction to be taken from it, and people take a diverge approach to whatever we do.
But it's not
It's
yours.
uncontrollable.
At the moment you put a movie out or a book out, is not yours anymore. People will do all sorts of interpretations, and 99% of those interpretations are things we never thought about. And actually, there is an example like 1984, that actually some right-wing news cases this is instruction manual. So, and it's not intended, it was not intended. But you cannot control this. People will use the fiction words, and you see this very often that they misuse fiction to convey exactly the opposite message that the creators intended. But we cannot do anything about it. It's unfortunate.
We have to end this. I would continue, but we have to end this. I would like so much to thank to Vera, and I have the greatest faith that that writer's block will pass. I know your movies, I know your stories, you know that, and I truly believe that next year we'll see something coming out. I also like to thank Pedro for being here, for this creative stir that you gave us. And with this, we end the third and final invited lecture sessions of What If of this year. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and also to Ana for this invite. And nice to meet you, Pedro, and everybody else. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Obrigada.
Thank you.
And I will go to bed now because it's midnight. Time to sleep. Goodbye, everybody. Nice to meet you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.